clearly you spent a lot of time studying and watching the old films.
Yeah, well, like I said here at the top, like I've been studying them in a way. Like I was just entertained by them when I was a child, but then when videotape came about, boy, that makes me sound old. I remember when radio was invented. We were all quite shocked. No, when videotape came about, it made me realize like these are people to be studied. You know, you could go back. Let's watch that sequence again. Go back, and that. What was the question again?
Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore, joined by Anthony Ray Bench, who I haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, it's been a while.
No, it's been a while. But look, we speak every day. We speak every day. We don't necessarily see each other. We're dealing with a lot. Family, the holidays.
The holidays.
It's great. But
it's the most stressful time of the year.
But one thing that could take that stress away is seeing a delightful film, Stan and Ollie, which you and I both saw. And I've been a fan of Laurel and Hardy since I was a kid. Used to watch the shorts in Detroit. They would have a show that would run on like Sunday mornings. It was like the silent classics, right? And they would run these shorts, right? And you'd see everything from like Buster Keaton stuff, Charlie Chaplin, Laurel and Hardy. And then later they would run Abbott and Costello stuff. And I just fell in love with Laurel and Hardy. And then when I began to collect movies, this is true. Before VHS, I would buy movies on Super 8, and I bought this film called The Music Box. The Music Box is one of the great Laurel and Hardy shorts. And this film, Stan and Ollie, stars Steve Coogan and Jon C. Reilly.
I'm a huge fan of both of them.
I'm a huge fan of both, and they embody Stan and Ollie. I mean, they just sort of in a way they captured the spirit just through their performance, and it's the film focuses on something at the end of their careers. They're on this tour in England, going across the country.
They kind of have some drama between each other.
There's a lot of because it's the end of their careers, and so everything that was an issue comes out. They end up going on this tour with their wives, and of course, hilarity ensues. But I'll tell you. Jon C. Reilly and Steve Coogan just knocked it out of the park with this thing. I am a little worried about what audiences are going to think, only because I just wonder if. No, I'm serious. Like, I've seen the movie. I think it's great. It hasn't opened yet. I just wonder, are audiences going to embrace it? I hope they do.
Are you worried about us damn millennials?
Yeah, exactly. I'm worried about your generation.
I think we'll be fine.
Okay, that's good, because it's really the human story that's a big part of it. So that's what I hope that people are able to connect with, regardless of whether they know who Laurel and Hardy are. And what I'm hoping is that they'll seek out their films and learn about this legendary comedy duo.
And they're super easy to find these days.
Yeah, they are.
YouTube. Now
we've got, what's amazing, we have actor Jon C. Reilly and the director of Stan and Ollie, Jon S. Baird, coming into the Film Threat Podcast studios to talk to us today. Before they join us, I do want to mention a couple reminders. Read the Film Threat website.
Every day.
Every day.
Every damn day.
Every day, new reviews and content. The Film Threat Podcast, also, we're twice a week now. And something that would really help us out is if you wrote a good review. Go to iTunes, write a good review.
Share with your friends and family.
It's a good way to get the word out about the podcast. Will sort of bump us up in the iTunes rankings, and just anything you could do to support the show. Follow us on social media. We're Film Threat and everything. And then also don't forget our Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Film Threat or look up Film Threat on Patreon. Consider supporting us so we can continue to travel to film festivals and bring you episodes of our podcast like this one. Now let's talk to Jon C. Reilly and Jon S. Baird. it's a real honor to have you, John. Seriously.
Oh, well, thank
After
you.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
That's
Yeah.
nice of you guys to say.
Well, I should.
What's John Baird? Chop liver?
Yeah, exactly. We have two
No,
Johns.
he was talking to me.
Two
Oh,
Johns.
he was talking to you.
Two Johns on the show.
You were looking at me, but I
John-
guess you meant
John's-
John Baird.
Yeah, John C. Reilly, Jon S. Baird. Welcome to the Film Trap Podcast.
Thank you.
And I'm ecstatic that you both are here to talk about Stan and Ollie.
Me too. It's a movie that I really love talking about, even though I have to do a lot of it.
right.
And I'll tell you why. Because it's not about me. It's about Oliver Hardy. And that's the reason ultimately, it's the reason John was able to talk me into doing this is because I thought, well, this is someone that's worth reminding people about. And so when I talk about the film, I get the chance to remind people how brilliant Laurel and Hardy are. And as a modest Chicagoan, I'm much more comfortable talking about how great other people are than I am talking about myself.
But you are great, John. I have to say.
Come on.
That's why we wanted
great
you.
bastard.
That's why we wanted you to do it, because you are great.
Well, are you guys both fans of Laurel and Hardy? Like, did you grow up watching them? And it struck me that they're a comedy duo that had their own theme song before that was really a thing, right? I grew up, this sounds strange, I remember buying Super 8 films.
Right.
Of like Music Box, and then when I first moved to Los Angeles, trying to find that stairway.
Stairs, yeah.
Which
Over
is
in,
awesome.
Silver Lake, right?
But talk to me about your how you are a fan of Laurel and Hardy, because you had to be a fan to commit to doing this.
Yeah. I think pretty much everybody who joined this this production, including obviously John and Steve at the top, were Laurel and Hardy fanatics. Yeah, our production designer, costume designer, our cinematographer, the whole lot. Everybody sort of when we went to put the team together. There seemed to be the ones who really wanted to do it were huge fans of Laurel and Hardy, and from a personal point of view, I watched them as a kid, like I'm sure John did as well. Watched them as a kid on television and got into them there, and used to dress up as Stan Laurel at the school fancy dress thing,
wow.
And did that. So I'm sure, John, you're the same, right?
It's a question we get a lot these days, talking about the film. Like, when did you first become aware of Laurel and Hardy? And the truth is, when I tried to think of it, I thought, well, I've been aware of Laurel and Hardy as long as I've been aware.
Right.
Literally, and not only because they've been part of my life, they were on television from my very first memories of television. We also had Super 8 films of their movies in my house. But they have this eternal quality. Mm-hmm. It's not just my awareness of them, it's their act itself has this eternal quality. It seems, and they appeared, they were like this miracle. They were thrown together, not accidentally, but arbitrarily by Hal Roach. These two strangers plucked out of obscurity and said, he lost Harold Lloyd and he was looking for a new act. Like, I'll get the fat guy and the skinny guy. Mm-hmm. And it was that random of a decision, and it created one of the most miraculous partnerships in the history of performing. That is an incredible thing, So what I'm saying is, even when I first became aware of them, they already had this quality of being like salt and pepper. Like, when did you first become aware of salt and pepper? It just has always been, and it will always be.
That just blew my mind.
Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like fat and skinny. They're this dichotomy, yin and yang. Stan and Ollie, like, they've just always been there. And they didn't change either. They stayed the same. The quality level of their movies was so high for so long. And the characters that they authored didn't really change. The costumes were the same. People came and went. But there's this eternal quality to them. Yeah.
How did you get the look so perfect? There had to be a process going through with the costume design and the makeup. They're dead on.
Yeah.
John, you're fantastic. Just like being in that makeup is, can't be fun all day. But there had to be considerable work put into making it. You guys look perfect. And Steve Coogan.
there was a lot. There's obviously a lot of preparation, involved. We were working with people at the top of the game as well. John will tell you as well that our prosthetics designer Mark Cooley, who has won a couple of Academy Awards previously, is a guy who's.
By the way, he's been cheating on us, John.
He is.
He did Suspiria and the Bohemian Rhapsody movie.
Really?
Yeah, Mark is everywhere this year.
Mark was terrible. Yeah, he was a really terrible sort of designer.
No, he's a genius. That's why everyone wants him. A
total genius. Yeah, and from Mark to our costume designer, there was a lot of preparation went into it. But I have to say this, yeah. Regardless of how much prosthetic you have, how much, how you fill the costume out, you still have to inhabit. But in particular, John here, he has a big costume. He has a lot of prosthetic, but it's what goes on behind the eyes as well, And he has to become that character. He has to become that man, and that romantic and that very delicate man who was a 200-300 pound guy, he has to transform inside that costume. So regardless of how good the costume is, he brought it to life. Yeah.
And what was great was just so many of your mannerisms. You got like the simple things like how he uses his hands, right? Like clearly you spent a lot of time studying and watching the old films.
Yeah, well, like I said here at the top, like I've been studying them in a way. Like I was just entertained by them when I was a child, but then when videotape came about, boy, that makes me sound old. I remember when radio was invented. We were all quite shocked. No, when videotape came about, it made me realize like these are people to be studied. You could go back. Let's watch that sequence again. Go back, and that. What was the question again?
No, just how you got these mannerisms.
Yeah, so
like
the mannerisms. So that's really the outside. Like what you mentioned about the makeup. Of course, it's some of the best makeup that's possible in movies right now. The fat suit, all that. But that's all exterior stuff, and in a way. It's hard for me to take any credit for that. It's just was stuff that was put on me. I was part of the conversations about what it should be like, but it's not really my performance, And like John said, you're really looking for the heart of these guys. Both of them, Steve and I both really had to look at like, well, if that's the gesture, where did that gesture come from? Because unlike other performers, these roles were not written for them. They were the authors of these roles. These personas came from themselves. So we did this interesting kind of reverse engineering when we look at this, because there's not a lot of behind-the-scenes footage of them at all. So you can look at their on-screen or on-stage personas and reverse engineer it back to a sort of smaller version of who they really were. I think Oliver was a true romantic. Mm-hmm. That was the beautiful thing. Like, he gets a little flack in the movie from Stan for being just a kind of good time Charlie, but that was a beautiful thing about Oliver. Mm-hmm. He could have been this sad, fat clown, and instead he was out enjoying life, the fruits of Hollywood, like wine, women, and song, and poetry, and flowers. Like, that was a beautiful thing about him. So that was a really fun way to fill in. Anyone could do a tie twiddle or these little hand gestures, but my job was to like excavate the layers underneath that and figure out like, well, who was this person that authored this persona for himself? And that I have to say though, John gave me a great compliment for putting the life inside of this guy. But, I have to say, John, like from the very beginning, I tried to get out of this job. And I said to you on that first time you met, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of other people. And you just had this dogged enthusiasm. John has been our fearless leader from the beginning. Like, yes, we've had all these talented people that joined him along the way, but it was John that we were following. And it was John that got me to believe, you have to do this. You are the only one who could do this right now in our world, and you have to do it. And eventually I was convinced, and I sort of did it by, I've never been someone who jumps into the ocean when it's cold. I come with a few steps, these feet, and then maybe my calves and my knees. Oh, this next part's going to be very hard. But that's how I enter into situations I'm unsure of. And each step along the way, John would be there with enthusiastically telling me, no, look, it's brilliant. It was brilliant. Look what Mark's done with the makeup. Look what, like showing me, yes, John, you can. And I don't really think I really believed I could do it until we were done. Until John edited this movie, took out all the crappy parts that I gave him and used the very best to craft a performance that is what you see it. Like film is not an actor's medium. And Steve Coogan and I have been getting a lot of credit for these performances. And we did work very hard in them, of course. But film is a director's medium. And the film that you're watching is because this guy saw it from the beginning, and we followed him to the promised land. He crafted this. So as much as I want to take credit for doing a good job with the performance, I've done good performances in crappy movies before, and it's not satisfying. It to me means you've failed. Even if someone says, I didn't like that movie, but you were great in it. That means nothing to me. It means like, oh, well, shit, we failed. Who cares what my performance was like? If the thing doesn't work, then we failed. And the reason we didn't fail in this very difficult and intimidating endeavor was because this guy right here was our fearless leader from the start to the finish.
Well, that's very kind. But I have to say, I could be as fearless as you want, but you guys still have to go out there and do it. And the courage that these guys showed, it not only courage, because that's, there is a responsibility that you have when you play these two characters, and that takes a lot of courage as well. But also the just making a film is hard work. It really is. People think it's glamorous. It's really hard work. And these guys, when I used to come into rehearsals in the when they were putting together the dance routines and the comedic routines, seeing them sweating, deliberating over these tiny little moves, and John was adamant on when they did the Way Out West dance, when Laurel and Hardy did the Way Out West dance, they made a lot of mistakes. The real Laurel and Hardy made a lot of mistakes within that dance, and they wanted to replicate it so much that they wanted to put the mistakes in as well. So not only were they learning this dance, they were learning the mistakes as well. So you can be as fearless as you want. You have to have people who have the courage behind you.
I really love the story that it's. I guess in some ways it's a biopic of the comedy duo, but setting it at kind of the end of their career when they're going on this tour through England. And they're maybe not as well known as they're used to being well known, right? They're not as famous as they thought they were.
And they're dealing with health problems.
People thought they were dead. That's how forgotten they were. Yeah.
But I have to say, just those vaudeville routines were hysterical. Like I've seen the movies, but I hadn't seen these. Some of them are bits from their films, I guess. But what made that choice? What went into that choice, and then developing those bits? Because was any of that filmed, even like those old the tour?
I never saw any film of the tour, John. I don't know if you saw. I saw plenty of photographs. I heard a lot of audio. I listened to a lot of audio from those tours as well. We spoke to a lot of people who had been kids at the time, who had seen them on the tours. Even a couple of people who'd gone to the dressing room and spoke to Laurel and Hardy in the dressing room and described in great detail how their makeup looked and how they smelled and everything, which was fascinating. And talking to Stan's great granddaughter, who's still who was a good advisor for us. So picking all these bits out and putting it together. But Jon and Steve would obviously will tell you their own thing, but they had to as performers, they have done this as well and had to sort of tune into how would we feel about this, how would we do this. But the actual routines themselves, it's documented that quite a few of those, the county hospital was done, but Jon and Steve and Toby, our choreographer, made up the double door routine, right, Jon? That was all from scratch, right?
Yeah, well, it's inspired. There is a double door routine in Helpmates, a movie of theirs, where they save this woman who's committing suicide in a river. Remember that at all? Anyway, it's a double door routine, but it's two elevators and it's much shorter than what we did. But yeah, we had, in the case of the Way Out West dance, we tried to forensically recreate exactly what they did as close as we could. And then all the other things were inspired by stories of the tour or scripts that were written for the tour that there's not filmed, but you can see what it was that they did. Because we don't show this in the film, but on those tours, they actually would have a whole bill, a puppeteer and a tap dancing act and a thing like a real vaudeville show, and they would appear throughout. But so a lot of it's lost to the sands of time. So we had to kind of rediscover it. What was the first part of your question again?
Oh, just what went into recreating those vaudeville bits, knowing there's no film really of
a lot. As John said, a lot of
audio.
A lot of that was script though as well. There was still existing scripts from.
Oh wow! So the actual scripts.
Yeah, the actual scripts. It still sort of existed. And again, we got a lot of things that weren't in the public domain from Stan's great granddaughter. Who's kept a lot of this material. And and that's how we built it. We it was like making a jigsaw. You get the parts that are there, and if there's any parts missing, then you have to join the dots, and you make stuff up, and you get inspired by stuff, and that's what you do.
I remember now. You mentioned like the choice of setting this film in 1953 on their final tour,
right.
And that to me was a stroke of genius from our writer Jeff Pope. And having done Walk Hard. I have no business being in the biopic business. A lot of chutzpah making a biopic after taking the piss so much with that movie.
I love Walk Hard.
But because of that decision, because of the decision to set this movie in one time period with the occasional flashback, but for the most part, at one time period, this sort of elegy, the final chapter of their life together, that made me think like, well, that's the way to tell a life. Is to focus on very intently on one part of it. And it turns out, it's hard for me to believe because when I found this out, because when I was a kid, you'd watch them, you think like, oh, when they're done with this, they go home and they make dinner together and then they get into bed and you just literally cannot imagine them separated, right?
Right.
So to this idea that they were different people and that they actually didn't socialize during their heyday, Oliver would go off and do his thing, Stan would go edit and work, and they had very different personalities, and they really weren't social together during their big heyday. But when they were forced to be on every train, in every hotel room, every backstage without the luxury of going off to go, on a yacht to Catalina or whatever, they were forced to look at each other as human beings and say, I love you, And they both said like, that is when our friendship became a friendship between people as opposed to a friendship between performers. And that gave me a lot of confidence going into it. I said, well, I can do that. I know what it's like to be a performer my whole life, and I know what it's like to have sore knees and a sweaty brow, sitting in a dressing room and someone coming in talking to you about ticket sales. I know what that's like. I'll never be Oliver Hardy. There never will be another. But I walked a lot of the same paths that Oliver did.
The other thing, just to jump in here quickly, is the decision is to set it in that period was we could have set it in their heyday. However, if you're looking for a dramatic narrative with conflict, you have to challenge your characters. And in this particular period of their life, their challenges were ill health. They didn't have any money. They were facing the end of their career. Yeah. Oh, they were pushing uphill with all these things, and with that comes conflict, and with conflict comes drama, and we could mine a lot more out of the story and a lot more emotion as well, and just a little bit more interest than our conventional biopic, and that was the decision to really set it in that time period.
Just like you guys mentioned, they did have this really unique relationship that evolved through the years. What was it like exploring that with Steve Coogan?
Well, it's funny because, we talk about chemistry. We both knew that, Stan and Ollie had incredible chemistry almost from the moment from the first moment they appeared together. It was like, wow, something is right when those two guys are together. And so that's an intimidating thing. Recreate the chemistry of Laurel and Hardy. Like, it's a bit of a fool's errand. And when you think about it, like,
you guys did such a great job too.
Well, thank you. Chemistry is this thing we talk about as if it's this mysterious, gentle rain that falls upon certain people. I met her, I knew we had chemistry, and I knew we were bound to be married. As if it's something that no one has control over, that just is or isn't between two people. And I can tell you, having done 4 duo movies that are coming out this year, that's not entirely true. That chemistry can be found and it can be earned. And the way you do it is you spend as much time as possible shoulder to shoulder with that person. You find the courage to fail in front of them. You make a bunch of little mistakes and they forgive you and they say, that's all right, man, we'll figure it out. And they pick you up when you're down, or you pick up them up when they're down. And after a few weeks of that, next thing you know, like presto changeo, unless they're a real dick, you've got chemistry, you know? And despite actors' reputation, dicks are few and far between among actors. Most people, if you really get to know them and you really open your eyes to them and open their heart, you can find some symbiosis, you know. And I had to do it with Joaquin Phoenix and Will Ferrell, Sarah Silverman, and Steve Coogan on this one. So the way we did it was we learned to love each other, you know, because it's almost like this foxhole experience, the way guys talk about war. Like, we were under so much pressure together, and all I had was this other guy. You know, like, no one else understood it the way that he understood it, the pressure I was under. So I've got someone I'll love for the rest of my life in Steve Coogan. And the reason is that we went through this trial of fire together. I mean, we walked into it because this guy said, you can do it.
And that kind of parallels Laurel and Hardy.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. They were thrown together. They had to come up with an act. They didn't know each other. So that each of those facts gave me a little bit more confidence, you know?
Well, it's interesting. You're no stranger to comedy duos. I mean, you and Will Ferrell have been, I mean, you're a legit comedy duo, right? Wouldn't you say? I mean, and you mentioned the other.
Well, I wouldn't compare us to Laurel and Hardy. I mean, well, Will and I have done 3 movies together. You know, these guys, how many?
107, was it?
Something like that. Yeah,
it was. Yeah,
it's a lot.
At least, anyway.
So
you have a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, and the level of, I don't know. It's. Yeah. So anyway, I'm not sure what your question was, but sure, I've been in, not only that, but I've been in other kinds of duos. I have brothers in my real family. I have, you know, someone like Paul Thomas Anderson, who feels like a brother to me, an intense partnership and collaboration. You know, for that matter, Jon and I have to learn to trust each other and engage with each other. And it's a big act of trust for actors. You don't know these, you know, you meet a director, you know, he seems nice enough, you know, but you don't really know until you see the movie, whether they were worth trusting or not, you know, so it's this act of faith as you go along. You have to just go like, even if they've done great work in the past, you know, like, it's still like, what's going to happen now between us? How are you going to see me? Are you going to see the best in me? Are you going to encourage the best out of me? Or are you looking at something else? Like, so yeah, it's
you're talking of trust. I was going to pick up on this at the beginning. The reason I saw a film. I've seen all of Jon's films, obviously, but the movie that I remember talking to you about this, Jon. The movie I saw that you did that really sort of excited me into a place was The Perfect Storm. Now that sounds a bit strange, maybe considering your body of work, but I grew up in a fishing town. Right, I grew up and all my family were trawlermen, and I had never in my life seen anything, any drama or any movie that convinced me that these people on screen were my people, were these people, until I saw Jon in The Perfect Storm, and I couldn't tell the difference. I was like, literally, this could have been any of my family or any of the guys I went to school with or any of the people, you know, friends who decided to go into trawling. And when I saw this is an unbelievable actor, because I'm sure he has no experience in deep sea trolling whatsoever before that.
Well,
Yeah, but my point being that trust
not
and
for
stuff.
a living.
Yeah. But my point, John, is trust.
Yeah,
but it's
yeah.
the same goes. And I didn't fully appreciate it until you said just now. You can't really know how it's going to be until you. Of course, you can't. I mean, I'd never really thought about that. And that's why maybe you get actors who have these quirks and they try and test you. Does this person know what they're doing? But that's when I trusted him. Was when I saw that film and I was like, had never seen anything like it before.
It's funny you mentioned The Perfect Storm because that's one of the few examples where I feel like I was under a similar pressure, not because everyone knew who Murph was, but because that guy died. That guy's family still lives in Massachusetts.
Yep.
Those people were real. That their bodies are somewhere at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. So going into that, I was like, we have to do right by these people. These are not characters invented for a movie. These are, some skeletons out in the middle of the ocean right now. So, it's a similar thing of honoring the legacy of someone. It's not just another character.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, John, because your career, you've kind of, gone on two paths in the sense that you've done comedy. You've been great at comedy. You've also done drama. And I feel Stan and Ollie is kind of the culmination of all of that. It's the perfect combination of your comedic sensibilities and your ability to, just do drama in the sense where, John is talking about your performance in Perfect Storm, which I completely forgotten about that it was so awesome. But how do you feel about that? Because not all actors can do both.
No.
But you have that in you. How do you develop, and especially in the Sisters Brothers, which I saw recently, I thought was a great a mix of both comedy and drama as well.
Well, that to me is the truth about life. Life is comedy and drama. There's a reason there's two masks. It's because that's the truth about life. You're at a funeral and someone tells you a joke and all of a sudden you're laughing at a funeral. Or you're at an amusement park on a Ferris wheel and you remember your dead mother because she took you on the Ferris wheel the first time. That's the way life is. And that's, to me, being honest about life. Really, you never let the audience off the hook. If it's something's funny, you don't let them feel like it's just going to be all fun and games. That's why Step Brothers, I think, is such a popular film, because it turns on these very real emotions, very family dynamics. We're goofing around a lot, but it can turn on a dime into something that seems very scarily familiar to your own family. So, well, I'm really glad that you said that. I appreciate your compliment about the fact that it used my talents. But honestly, last year was an incredible year for me. I did 3 movies back to back, which I've never done before. I've worked a lot in my life, but I've never done 3 literally with a couple days in between. I was rehearsing this one, Stan and Ollie, while I was doing Holmes and Watson. I was coming in on the weekends on my day off to do the Way Out West dance with Steve. So this past year, those 3 movies back to back, and then Wreck-It Ralph on top of all of them happening at the same time, I kept finding myself saying wow, it's taking everything you got to pull this off. It's taking every single experience you've ever had, Walk Hard and Perfect Storm included, to do what you're doing right now today. You couldn't have done this in 1998. I couldn't have. That's the beautiful thing about if you stay plugged into yourself as an artist, it does accumulate, And I'm really proud of those films I have coming out this year. This one in particular, because I do think it's a synthesis of everything I can do. When I came home from work at the end of these days, I think oh my God, I'm exhausted. I'm at my wit's end. And I have to get up at fucking 4 a.m. again to go do this makeup again tomorrow. And then I thought, that's perfect. What more does anyone want but to be fully utilized in doing what they love to do? So I feel really lucky that maybe I'll never work again. Maybe I'll get hit by a bus on the way out of here.
That's
but
no.
If so, that'd be a hell of a swan song, Yeah.
So, what have been the reactions to the film that you've seen? Is it? I mean, I grew up a Laurel and Hardy fan, and then that led to. I kind of feel like that led to other comedy, Abbott and Costello, and what are you hearing? What are people telling you guys?
Well,
Hopefully you doubled back quickly after Abbott and Costello, right back to Laurel.
Right, exactly. But yeah, just I grew up. I mean, that was my Saturday morning, Sunday morning. Was watching those shorts. They ran them in Detroit, and it was an amazing education.
I think, like, whenever I do a film, and, you know, John, we've talking about Perfect Storm, and I'm sure when John did that movie, the first reaction he looked for was from the families of the guys that you're making the film about. And likewise with this, the first reactions I would look for in a movie like this is from the surviving family. Ollie didn't have any children, so it would, you know, from Stan's side, or else the, you know, extensive fan base that Laurel and Hardy still have in the fan club, the Sons of the Desert, who are, you know, a worldwide organisation with fan clubs all around. So you would start with them, and you look for them, and you kind of go, have we got, you know, have we done Laurel and Hardy justice? You know, that's the first thing you look for, and we seem to have been getting incredible sort of feedback from them.
That's good to hear, because I don't know if you've been on this thing called the internet. It can be cruel.
Yeah, brutal.
Just did a movie about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He broke it. Yeah, he totally smashed the thing to pieces. Yeah, but yeah. So that's been a good start. And then you just hope people get the film after that. So after that pressure is taken off, because you know, anybody who remembers Laurel and Hardy, the first thing they're going to do when they come to see this film is they're going to be edge of their seat for the first second till they see them. Have they got it? Am I convinced? Okay, I believe them. And the amount of people who say to me, the amount of interviews I do, and say, we completely forgot we were watching actors. We thought we were watching the guys. That's the biggest compliment that these guys can get, you know.
Yeah, it's funny, the reactions that this movie, if you love Laurel and Hardy, you come in with your arms folded. All right, what are you going to show me? Because I love these guys, you know. If you don't know who Laurel and Hardy is, you come in with your arms folded. All right, who are these guys, and why should I care? You know.
That's
so,
funny.
And we knew that. We knew it going in, and John made the daring choice of starting the movie with Way Out West. You know, we were like, well, we either got it or we don't, and we're going to show them whether we got it or we don't at the top of the movie. So, you know, that's why we were so hell-bent on getting it right, because we knew, like, this is a big ask, and if I was going to see this movie, I'd be doing the same thing. Like, all right, who does this guy think he is to take on my hero, you know? But I'm glad to say that people are coming away from the film surprised. The people who love Laurel and Hardy come away because surprised that they learned about two human beings. People who already know the act and already know the movies, they're already sold on the legacy of Laurel and Hardy. But what they come away with is like, you know, the greatest compliment I got from someone was just yesterday or the day before. This guy said, you know, this film, I loved that this film, that it was about Laurel and Hardy. But the truth is, John, this film, the treatment that you gave to these two people, it could have been about anybody, and I would have had the emotional reaction that I had because of what you didn't make it dependent on their work. You brought us into these two men. You know, we in a way, like, Steve and I are not really the funny ones in the movie. Like, Nina and Shirley are the funny ones, the ones who play our wives, and Rupert and Rufus, who plays Delphont. You know, like, those are the real big laughs in the movie when you watch it with an audience. Like, the fact that it's a little bit of a bait and switch. Like, come in and look at the funny men, Laurel and Hardy, and then when you get there, like, oh, by the way, we're going to tell you what they're like as people, and what their friendship was like, and what they said to each other when they hurt each other's feelings. You know, like, that's an intense experience that people don't expect coming into the movie. And I don't know, my friend Paul Thomas Anderson saw the movie recently. We screened it at the Egyptian Theater, and of course I was really biting my nails about what he was going to say about it afterwards. And he was just so happy and so proud. And he said, man, I needed to see this movie right now. This is the movie I needed to see. The world is so fucked up right now. We're so divided against each other, and we're constantly taught by computers, by the way, who think in zeros and ones. We're taught by computers to think you're for me or against me. You know, you're black or white, you know, blue or red, all that. We're in this time of where everything is telling us we're different than each other. And here we made a movie about empathy and about people having a legitimate beef with each other and getting past it, saying you're a faulty human being and I love you. Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful thing right now. Like, so the reaction's been great.
Yeah.
So far.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I had that same experience going in and kind of folding my arms and thinking, like, I grew up watching this comedy duo. Is it going to be believable? And it was that first scene that sold it. I mean, it was that first scene and those little touches. It was what you do with your tie, you know, it was the little, I don't know, those subtle little things that made it work. And
there's a playful quality to the movie.
Yeah.
You know, we dance around with this idea of their on-screen lives in their off-screen lives. And it's something Jon does really well. You know, I've heard you say, Jon, that your first film, Filth, was miles away from this and how different it was and how your agent didn't think you would want to do this script because it was so different than the subject matter of Filth. But having watched Filth, I can say that they're not that different, actually.
Really? That's good. Here we go.
And you have an ability in your filmmaking to, you know, like sometimes life seems like magical for a second. Like things seem a little bit bigger than they are. There's certain people have a little twinkle dust around them or something. And then other days where it just seems like gray monotony, like the mundanity of the mundane quality of life. But there's other days when it feels like things are slightly more heightened. You know, like, wow, the mystery of the world, the magic of being alive. You tap into that in Filth too. There's not a fairy tale, but a slightly heightened
sense of reality,
version of reality. Yeah. That even in Filth, there's a sweetness to it.
Yeah.
And so I didn't see Filth before I made this film. I hadn't seen it, and I felt like, well, I'm not going to watch it because what if I don't like it? Then I'm working with this guy, and I already just loved him as a human being. Like, I didn't need to see his movie to believe in him. I knew that he was leading us to the promised land, but when I did finally watch Filth, I thought, wow, okay, so that's your style, Jon. That is your style, regardless of subject matter.
That's
like putting a little bit of fairy dust on things. You're very good at.
It's not too late to change the marketing campaign from the director of Filth.
Let's say, yeah.
Stan Ollie.
There's no way Sony Classics are going to go for that one right now.
Yeah, no, I'm really curious to see it too. I was looking up your resume on IMDb and checking out Filth. Just really, that one stood out. So now I need to see that.
Oh yeah, it's a great one. It's a great one. Yeah,
that's my homework. That's great. So what I'm interested in when I was asking about, you know, the reaction is people who don't know Laurel and Hardy. I want them to love this movie. And what would you say to people who are not familiar with Laurel and Hardy?
Well, I would say, where have you been? Right. They're two of the greatest clowns that have ever lived. Yeah. I would say to people that if you're interested in the backstage life of performers, and I think that's a pretty broad interest right now. That's where reality TV comes from. You know, people or CSI for that matter, behind the scenes, what are people thinking that do the jobs that we're interested in? And if you're interested in what it's like to be a performer, an actor, you know, then this movie is going to be very interesting to you. And that's one of the things, like, I know a lot of younger people, like, it's almost like the rock stars right now are comedians. You know, younger people, I know a lot of younger people, they're obsessed with the science of comedy and the math of comedy and the art of it, the art of telling a joke. like stand-up comedians are the rock stars of our day. They're like the trumpet players from the 1940s. You know, comedians are where it's at right now. So if you're interested in how comedy is constructed and what two of the greatest masters of that craft did, then you should go see this movie. And then you should watch a lot of Laurel and Hardy, because not because I like it or because I'm nostalgic for the 1930s, because that stuff will make you laugh. It will make you laugh out loud. I guarantee it. I've seen it happen over and over, from young to old. Like, their work is universal. It still works. You will laugh out loud. And I can't say that about Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton or Harold Lloyd. I'm impressed by those guys. I'm engaged and interested by those guys. But I don't laugh out loud when I'm watching Charlie Chaplin. I still laugh, even after all this. Just this weekend, I'm watching shorts. I'm in the bathtub and with the iPad next to the bathtub, laughing out loud by myself at Laurel and Hardy, even after all of this. I think that says everything right there, you know?
And it's never been easier to find their stuff.
Yeah, it's never been cheaper to find their stuff either.
That too.
Yeah, I mean, you could go down a YouTube rabbit hole of just watching Laurel and Hardy stuff, and that's
Did that this morning.
You did it, but that's what I hope that people do, because it's unbelievable how their comedy resonates to today. It's like you said, it's universal.
Well, the other thing about Laurel and Hardy is Laurel and Hardy, their DNA is in comedy right up to now. You look at any of the top comedians now, or have been for the last however many years, and John will tell you this as well. I'm sure you and Will Ferrell looked at Laurel and Hardy when you were doing Step Brothers as well, and I'm sure like Steve Martin and Jim Carrey and Rowan Williams and all these great physical comedians.
I mean, we literally stole from Oliver Hardy for Wreck-It Ralph every day. You know, we're making sounds. Those sounds of getting hit on the head and all that. I'm literally stealing from Oliver Hardy.
Yeah, but the DNA it does, you know. It even though it's not maybe obvious, you ask any of these guys who their influences were, and I'll guarantee you, Laurel and Hardy will be right up the top of the list, you know.
Well, the film is Stan and Ollie, and it opens December 28th. You need to see this film, and Jon C. Reilly, Jon S. Baird, it's been an honor to have you on the show, seriously.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us, and thanks for caring about movies.
Thank you.
Oh.
Roll sound. Roll camera. Ready, boys?
Quiet, please.
We're at West Scene 12, take one.
How do you feel about the size of the audiences?
I've been a little disappointed.
And they said, could you persuade Stan and Ollie to do some publicity in order to turn the tour around?
Will there be any more money?
They said no.
Well, who is they?
People. The worst kind.
Here we are.
The Eiffel Tower.
How is Oliver? He pulling weight?
How's your knee?
It hurts.
Has he been pushing you a little too hard, babe?
No.
You could have long time ago said goodbye, Oliver.
That's all in the past.
You're not still carrying that around, are you?
Because I went ahead and did a picture with someone else 16 years ago.
You and Harry are just going to be great together. Couldn't sleep for days when they told me what you did.
And I couldn't sleep when I did it.
You betrayed me. Betrayed our friendship. I loved us.
You loved Laurel and Hardy, but you never loved me. The doctors told me I can't continue with the tour. My heart won't take it.
He asked me, since you were sick, if I wouldn't mind carrying on the show with somebody else.
May I introduce to you Mr. Nobby Cook?
You're not leaving, are you, Stan?
The show must go on.
That was pure magic. It's brilliant.
We like to finish now with a little dance.
You sure? I can do it.
I'll miss us when we're gone.
So will you.
What time is it now?
Hold this.
Do we really need that trunk?